Hello students, welcome to Study Circle. This video is intended for those students who are going to appear for class 12 CBSE board exams for history exam. So, this video is very useful for revision purpose. We already studied two chapters earlier that is available in the playlist, and now we are going to do the revision of chapter 3rd, that is Kinship, Caste and Class, the early societies. So, without wasting any much time, we are going to start the video. But if you are new to my channel, please do subscribe, do like, share and share your feedback in the comment box. So let's start. What is in this chapter? The topic 1 is Mahabharata, many rules and varied practices. So what is in the first point is that historians often use textual tradition to understand the processes of social behavior, social situations and practices. The Mahabharata is one of the most colossal epic of subcontinent which has in its present form more than 1 lakh verses and depicts a wide range of social categories and situations. The main theme of Mahabharata is about the two sets of warring cousins. The epic also contains different sections laying down norms of behaviors for different groups. The central story deals with the family feud of Pandavas and Kauravas. The critical edition of Mahabharata was started in 1919 by V.S. Sukthankar. The team collected Sanskrit manuscript of Mahabharata and compared each manuscript. After that selected only those verses which were common in most versions of Mahabharata. It was published in multiple volumes running over 13,000 pages and took 47 years to complete. Initially, it was believed that actual practices were mentioned in Sanskrit by Brahmanas in this epic, but when those in Pali, Prakrit, and Tamil were studied, it became clear that Sanskrit text was not always followed and even rejected sometimes also. All families were not identical, these were differences in the way they behaved with each other. Family is a part of larger networks of people called kinfolk or relative. In many cases, family ties are regarded as natural and based on blood, but in some families, blood relations are not regarded as cousins. According to Mahabharata, the patrilineal started after the battle which was fought between the Kauravas and the Pandavas. When there were no sons, their brother or some other male was considered as the successor. In some cases, even women, for example, Prabhavati Gupta also exercised power, but they belonged to the ruling class in most cases. Patrilineal was followed by Brahmanas and the ruling class. Women had no claims as successor on father's property. Their marriage outside the kins was considered desirable, and system of Kannadan was considered very important, and it was the most important religious duty of the father. 8 forms of marriage were recognized by the Dharma Shastras or Dharma Sutras, out of which 4 were considered good. The last 4 were followed by those who did not follow Brahminical text. When towns were growing, some outside people mingled with local people. The Brahmanas made clear rules for social behavior. In 500 BC, these norms and rules were written down in Sanskrit and were called Dharma Shastras and Dharma Sutras. The most important work was Manusmriti. Brahmanas maintained the power and authority and ensured that rulers of marriage and social behavior should be maintained. On Brahminical practice started 1000 BC onwards, and people were classified in terms of Gotra. Each Gotra was named after a Vedic share. Two important rules of Gotra, mainly for women, were women have to give up their Gotra once they get married and adapt their husband's Gotra. Members of the same Gotra cannot marry. Evidence of Gotra and its practices can be seen in ruling lineages like Satvahana's inscription, where historians can trace family and marriages. Though Satvahana rulers followed the matronymics, that means pertaining to mother's name, still the patrilineal system was followed. Now come to the next topic, that is social differences within the beyond the framework of caste. What is in this topic is that Brahmanas claim that the Dharma Shastras and Dharma Sutras laid down the order which was divine. It placed them at the top of the sutras at the bottom, position with the order that determined by birth. Dharma Shastras and Dharma Sutras also contained rules about the occupation of the four Varnas caste system. Brahmanas were supposed to perform sacrifices, study and teach Vedas, give and receive gifts. Kshatriyas were engaged in warfare, protect people, study Vedas, get sacrifices performed and make gifts. Vaisyas were responsible to engage in agriculture and trade, and Sudras were committed to serve the three. Brahmanas maintained the Varna system by several methods. First, they claimed that it was of divine origin. Secondly, they advised king to maintain this division in their kingdom. They persuaded the people that status was determined by birth. In certain sources, the Varna system was also challenged. Shastras permitted Kshatriya to become kings, but several lineages had non-Kshatriya kings. While Buddhist texts suggest Mauryas were Kshatriyas, Brahminical texts describe them as low of origin. The Sungas and Kanvas were Brahmanas and they got the authority by gaining power, which shows that political power could be taken by anyone who had the strength to hold it. For example, ruler Rudradaman and King Sudarsana. The outsiders were called Milechas, who spoke non-Sanskrit language, came from Central Asia but later on learned Sanskrit and increased their status. Satvahana rulers were Brahmanas and destroyer of the pride of Kshatriyas and did not allow intercaste marriages, yet got into marriage alliance which shows that kings wanted to maintain the purity of four Varnas but they never followed these rules. Varnas are four but Jati are several. Whenever a new group that came into their contact who did not belong to four Varnas, it was assigned a new Jati. For example, Nishads, that means forest dwellers, Suvarnakar, goldsmith. Sometimes people of same jati organized into groups called srenis or guild. For example, silk weavers of Lata in Gujarat migrated to Mandasur. There were also some people who did not follow the Varna system and jatis. Their social practices were not influenced by the Brahminical ideas. They were described as uncivilized. Those who did not speak Sanskrit were also outside the Varna system and were called Milechas. Untouchables were the people outside the Varna and they sharply divided the society. These untouchables performed duties which were regarded as polluting, like handling corpses, dead animals, etc., and were called Chandals. Manusmriti laid down duties for Chandals, that is, they lived outside the village. Chandals used discarded utensils, used clothes, and iron ornaments. They could not walk in villages at night. They had to sound a clapper in streets so that people should keep away. They also had to dispose of the bodies of those who had no relative and serve as executioners. Some historians believe that Chandals opposed this system. Now come to the topic 3, that is beyond the birth, resources and status. What is in this topic is that, according to Manusmriti, property is to be divided among sons and women could not claim a share. The women can retain the gifts they received during their marriage as Stridhana. This can be inherited by their children. Husbands had no claim on it. Manusmriti warned women against hoarding their property without husbands' permissions. Women in rural families had access to wealth. For example, Prabhavati Gupta was granted land, but such examples were very rare. The difference in the distribution of wealth among men and women created difference in social status in family as well as society. The occupation of Sudras were servitude to the other three Varnas. They were generally very poor. Brahmanas, Kshatriyas, and Vaishyas were rich, though there are instances of poor Brahmanas as well. The rich were the patrons of bards, poets, artists, singers, dancers, etc. According to Buddhist sources, there were evidences of wealthy Sudras, for example, son of Matangi. A wealthy Sudra can live like a rich man, can have servants, and people respect him. This shows that economic status determined the status in the society. The Buddhist text Sutta Pitaka says that life of man was simple and his needs were limited, so there was less chances of conflicts. With development, greed to acquire wealth also increased. Hence, it was decided to select a person as authority who would have the power to control over others. The elected person was called Mahasammata, and this shows that the idea of leadership was based on choice purely. The king gave protection, security, and safety to his people, and in return gained taxes and obedience of his people. This led to the formation of the system where people could change whenever it was needed. Now come to the next topic, that is topic 4, handling text historians and the Mahabharata. What is in this topic is that while analyzing a text, historians considers many elements. First, they consider the language of text. When analyzing Mahabharata, they examined whether it was written in Prakrit, Pali, Tamil, or Sanskrit. If it was in Sanskrit, then it was used by Brahmanas. Secondly, the kind of text, whether in story form or in mantras, which were chanted by people on a special occasion. Historians try to ascertain a date as to get the date of creation. Another factor was also considered whether it was learned by the ruling class. Place of composition was also important, whether it was written in forest, gurukul, or in royal place. It makes it difficult to understand a text as Mahabharata. Mahabharata is written in simple Sanskrit then used in Vedas and Prasastis. Historians classify the content into two heads. First is narrative, which contains stories, for example, Eklavya, story of Eklavya, and the prescriptions. Second was the prescriptions about social norms meant for purposes of instruction. For example, Bhagavad Gita. However, this division was not very sharp, but it is believed that didactic section was added in later periods. The text is referred to as Itihasa in Sanskrit tradition. The actual conflict between Pandavas and Kauravas was orally transmitted. But other feels that there is no evidence of the battle. The original story of Mahabharata was probably composed by charioteer bards known as Sutas, who accompanied the Kshatriya warrior in the battlefield and composed poems about their victories, achievements, and passed to coming generations. Since this great epic covered a period of 1000 years, it is not possible to be written by one person. From 500 BCE, Brahmins took over the task of writing and compiled this epic. When chiefdoms became kingdom, the kings wanted their itihasa to be recorded and preserved. Many sections were added in Mahabharata from 200 BCE to 200 CE, where worship of Krishna became prominent, who was considered to be an avatar of Lord Vishnu. The teachings of Krishna to Arjun in the battlefield became important section of Mahabharata, which increased from 10,000 to 1 lakh verses. This enormous composition is attributed to sage Vyasa. There were efforts of historians in fixing the place. Description of the city in the epic might be added later when town flourished, or it could be the poet's imagination. For archaeologist B. B. Lal notes that walls of mud and mud bricks were excavated in 12th to 17th century BC. Mud plaster where reed marks suggest houses have reed walls. Third phase, that is on 6th century BC, houses were made of mud bricks. This description of house in second or third level is not similar to the description of the house in the text. During Mahabharata time, polyandry was practiced. For example, Draupadi. Mahabharata was considered a dynamic text for various reasons. The growth of Mahabharata spread in many places and several languages. Sanskrit text was the most prominent, and many stories were told again and again, and many were added, but central story remains the same. The episodes were depicted in sculpture, painting, performing arts like dance, drama, and other kinds of narrations. Now it's time to know the important terms of this chapter. So first term is that Kula. Kula means the families. Next is Jati. Jati means large network of kinfolk. Vansa. Vansa means lineage. Patrilineage was for tracing descent from father to son. Matrilineage, tracing descent through the mother. Endogamy, marriage within a group. Exogamy, marriage outside a group. Polygyny, that is practice of man having several wives, also known as polygamy. Polyandry, practice of women having several husbands. Kanyadan, gift of daughter in marriage by the father. Metronymic, names derived from that of mother. Gotra, descent from a common ancestor. Nishad, that is hunting community. Milecha, Milecha means the outsiders or the barbarians. Shrenis are for guilds. Vanik for merchants. Mendicant, religious people living on alms. Chandala, untouchables who handled corpses and dead animals. Puta, a Sanskrit word meaning son. Istridhana, given to women on the occasion of their marriage. Bards, bards means the poets reciting epics. Sutta Pitaka is the text or teachings of Buddha. Mahasammata, the elected leader. Didactic, something that is meant for purpose of instruction. Itihas means that thus it was, or history. Sutas were the charioteer bards. So now it's time to know the important dates. So what happens in 500 BCE that Panini wrote Ashtadhyayi, a work on Sanskrit grammar. 500 to 200 BCE, major Dharma Sutras compiled in Sanskrit. 500 to 100 BCE, that is early Buddhist texts in Pali, including Tripitaka. 500 to 400 CE, that is Ramayana and Mahabharata, compiled in Sanskrit. 200 BCE to 200 CE, that is Tamil Sangam literature, composed, and Manusmriti composed in Sanskrit. 100 CE, that is Charak Samhita and Susrut Samhita, composed in Sanskrit, both being works on medicines. 200 CE, that is Puranas, started being composed in Sanskrit. 300 CE, the Natya Sastra of Bharat, composed in Sanskrit. 300 to 600 CE, that some other Dharma Sastras composed in Sanskrit. So, this is the whole revision notes of the chapter 3. Hope you enjoy the video. If you like this video, then please do like, share, subscribe, and don't forget to share your feedback in the comment section. Thank you.